I like to think of myself as an optimistic person. I like to think I see the good in situations, in people. And so with about a month left in the NBA regular season, I thought it was worth going through one reason for optimism for each team. And for some teams, they have lots of reason for optimism. Others, it's not maybe looking great. Fans of those teams maybe aren't super excited with where they're at. But I think there's always one thing you can point out, no matter how good or bad you are doing in life, there's always one point of optimism that you can pull from. So we're going to go through all 30 teams and highlight their reason for optimism heading into the final stretch of the NBA season. We're going to go in alphabetical order. So let's start with the Philadelphia 76ers. Their reason is pretty clear. Tyrese Maxey, VJ Edgecombe, they are the backcourt of the future. They fit well together. They are both young. They are both really talented. There was concern with, the Embiid, Paul George era. How would the 76ers kind of move past that? I think they found that. Now, can they merge those two timelines? We'll see. But that backcourt, they are almost as happy as any team with those two. The Milwaukee Bucks is a little bit trickier. But I think the reason for optimism is Giannis is still there. And you could look at that probably in two different ways. On the one hand, he's your probably franchise leader in lots of categories. He's probably the franchise's best player at this point. And he is still on your team. But if they do end up trading him, there's still that hope for a gigantic package back. And if I'm a Bucks fan, I'm either hoping that Giannis stays, maybe due to some lottery luck in the draft. Maybe they find other ways to build a team around him. Or if you are going to trade him, which I've talked about a lot in the past really 12 months, you want a really good package back. And so for right now, the fact that he's still there is a reason for optimism for either of those two options. The Bulls I have next. To me, the optimism is all around two players, Josh Giddey and Matas Buzelis. They're just a really fun duo to build around. Giddey just put up a pretty big triple-double last night. Nobody was watching the game because everybody was watching Bam score 83 points, but he's looked like a franchise cornerstone. Maybe some questions on what his ceiling will be, but he's really taken a big step this year. And then I think Matas has taken an even bigger step. He scored 41 in this game that nobody watched. But those two in particular are a lot of fun. And the Bulls are always really, it seems like in this limbo of they're not bad enough to be one of the worst teams and tank. They're also never good enough to compete. And so then that puts them probably in the worst position you can be in sports, stuck in the middle. And there are a few teams in the NBA like that. But with those two, that's a big point of optimism for next year and in the next couple of years. Can you build around those two? That's what the Bulls are going to try to do the next couple of years. The Cavaliers, James Harden and Donovan Mitchell are going to give you a legitimate shot this year. And that's what the Cavs have been looking for really the last couple of years with this core. Hasn't necessarily worked out in their favor. I get James Harden doesn't have the playoff record to probably really deserve this, but putting two stars like that together with Evan Mobley, with Jared Allen, with some role players, it's the best shot that the Cavaliers have ever had. And so if I'm the Cavs, yes, it's been a shaky year, but if I'm going into this playoffs, I'm thinking we have as good of a shot as anybody and probably the best shot we've ever had with this core. So I think that's a reason to be optimistic. The Celtics, tons of reason for optimism. They've had one of the best years, all things considered. I would just sum it up in saying they haven't taken a step back despite losing Tatum. And really, you could expand on that. I mean, they won 61 games last year. So to be a 60-win team and to lose 5 of your top 9 players, essentially. Obviously, Jason Tatum is the big one, but they moved on from Drew Holiday. They moved on from Kristaps Porzingis. They moved on from Al Horford. They moved on from Luke Cornett. Those are 5 big players from the last couple of years for Boston. And so the thought was, okay, Tatum's going to be out for most of the year. Maybe let's do not necessarily a rebuild, but sort of a retool and be ready for next year. And that just hasn't been the case. They haven't taken a step back at all. Now Tatum's back. He looks maybe not 100% Jason Tatum, but he looks 80 to 85%, which is really impressive. And now the thought is, okay, well, how far could this go? So as I've said, that makes them one of the probably more impressive teams and probably a team that is feeling the best, just all things considered with what they've gone through. The Clippers, it's all about Kawhi. Kawhi looks like the old Kawhi Leonard. And it reminds you that there's probably not many other players that are as fun to watch when they are on than Kawhi. whether it's his two-way ability, whether it's his handles that look like old Kawhi Leonard. He looks healthy. His handles might not be as smooth as someone like a Kyrie, but they're very distinct. And the way he just moves about his business, couple dribbles between the legs, gets to a spot, is very flat, but very, very effective jump shot. It's really fun to watch. And it's very different from a lot of players. But when he's on, I would argue he's still a top 5 player in the league. And the fact that we've had a whole season of it is a reason for optimism. And it's a reason to tune into Clippers games. The Grizzlies, I think they made the smart decision to start a rebuild. And I do think that's a reason for optimism. Some teams get stuck in the middle. And as we've said, that's the worst place to be in sports. And it's sometimes hard to trade some of your best players. But between trading Desmond Bane in the offseason, then trading Jaren Jackson Jr. at the deadline, I think they're making the smart choice to rebuild. They gave it a shot with that group. They are now really trying to move on. Wouldn't be surprised if John Morant's back. And if I'm a fan, that's a good thing. That group wasn't really going to get you anywhere. So let's rebuild. Let's collect a bunch of first-round picks, and let's build for the future. And I think that's reason to be optimistic. The Hawks also just around one person, and that's Jalen Johnson. I think he is turning into a star, unless you already consider him a star. And on a team that maybe hasn't lived up to expectation, Jalen Johnson is now the face of the Hawks. And he's still really young. He's still improving. So if I'm a Hawks fan, everything that's going to be exciting about the next couple of years, it starts with Jalen Johnson. Next up, the Miami Heat. I'm recording this the day after Bam scored 83. I had something about Kel'el Ware. I think he has as much potential as most people in the NBA, and certainly most people on the Heat. But Bam then just scored 83 points. And sure, that doesn't really give you any optimism for the future. It doesn't completely change things. But if I'm a Heat fan, that performance in that game alone is probably enough to get me through the rest of the year. And essentially say, yeah, I don't really care what else is going on with the roster. Bam just scored 83 points. And I do think it would have been different if it was like a Tyler Hero or somebody else on the team. But the fact that it was Bam, just how respected he is, kind of taking over for like a Udonis Haslem as like the Miami Heat guy, just makes it even cooler. And so if I'm a Heat fan right now, I don't really care where the rest of the season is going, where the roster is going. I'm going to just bask in the fact that Bam just scored 83 points. The Hornets, you could have a lot of reason for optimism. You could talk about their starting 5, just how much success they've had. But I'm going to just say Con Knippel. He could be one of the greatest shooters ever. And for him to be this good as a rookie, who knows what the ceiling is, but at a minimum, he does look like one of the greatest shooters ever. And he's still only 20 years old. So that in and of itself is enough optimism, let alone everything else that's happened with their starting lineup. The Jazz, I think this is the last year of their rebuild. I do think now trading for Jaren Jackson Jr., now hopefully they'll get another top pick, get another young guy in there. I think this is the end of the rebuild. I think between Keontae George's ascension, Lauri Markkanen is still there. I think they bring back Walker Kessler. Now bringing Jaren Jackson Jr., another potentially really good young piece. I think now Utah is like, okay, now we're ready to compete. And I said for the Grizzlies, as a fan, it is fun to go on a rebuild, fun in a way, but it's also really fun to finally stop losing. Rebuilds are fun because, the future is unknown. You don't know what you might end up with, but at some point you do want to start winning. And if I'm Utah, I think that's about to happen. So it's going to be an exciting year for Utah next year. The Kings, not a lot of reason for optimism, but 2 of their rookies look pretty good. And they look like really 2 of the biggest steals in the draft. Neek Clifford went 24. I really liked him in college. I know he was older. That's why he fell. But he's looked really good, albeit has a lot of opportunity now in Sacramento. But he's looked good. And then Max Reynaud went 42. He also looks like he's going to be a big piece for them. So on a team that needs optimism, on a team that needs young players, getting 2 guys like that, who I think at a minimum are good rotation pieces, at not so good picks, that's what Sacramento needs. So I think that those 2 are enough to kind of push you into the future, give you some young players to be excited about. New York Knicks, to me, this is their best shot with their starting 5. It didn't look good a couple months ago, but they are playing a lot better. And the East is wide open. We've talked about it for a few teams that They could have a real shot to win the East. And the Knicks are one of those teams. And the five with Brunson, Hart, Mikal Bridges, Anunoby, Karl Anthony Towns, this is their best shot. For this core, this is their best shot to win a title. And they're playing well. And if I'm a Knicks fan, I'm excited going into these playoffs. It's going to be nerve-wracking, sure, but I'm optimistic. The Lakers, it's all about Luka. Luka is the present. Luka is the future. I do think he's almost fallen a little bit underrated. Yes, everyone can point to the antics. Yes, everybody can point to the bad defense. But to me, he's still a top 5 player in the league. And to just suddenly have that is reason for optimism if you're a Lakers fan. And you can look at an alternate timeline where that trade doesn't happen. LeBron is hurt and getting old. Austin Reeves has missed time. He's been hurt. Anthony Davis, he is also hurt. So imagine a Lakers team with all three of those guys hurt at once with pretty much nothing else. We'd be talking about them as one of the worst situations in the league. And instead, they have probably a top 5 player in the league in Luka. The Magic, I think Anthony Black is really living up to the hype. I talked about him in my Most Improved Players video. You can check that out if you want. He is finally showing why he was a top 10 pick. And I was kind of getting to the point where I was just going to cast him off. Wasn't a terrible player, but I didn't really know if he would turn into anything. And all of a sudden, I think he's an important piece for them. And so if you can get Franz Wagner healthy, if you can get Paolo going, if you can get Jalen Suggs healthy, that's suddenly a nice core. And you can see why they traded for Desmond Bane to add to that. Because when it's all right, it's a really good team. And so there's pieces there, and that's reason to be optimistic. It's also frustrating that they haven't really hit their ceiling yet, but the pieces are there. So I think there is still reason for optimism in Orlando. The Mavericks, I mean, Cooper Flag, he has missed some time, so we haven't really heard a bunch from him the last few months, but he had really high expectations going into the year. And to me, he exceeded those. And he showed he is the best teenager probably since LeBron. And yeah, he's got a long ways to go to live up to LeBron. And I'm not saying he's going to get there. But the fact that that's what we've been comparing him to, and that's really the only other example we have in NBA history, it shows how good Cooper Flag is. And if you're a Mavericks fan, it pretty much wiped away what was the worst trade in NBA history. That's how good Cooper Flag has been. Because now Mavericks fans are always going to think of the Luka trade, are always going to hate it. But the fact that they have now Cooper Flag, one of the best young players in the league, the fact that it pretty much flipped that trade and got everybody to focus on this, that is a ton of optimism. And so everything in Dallas is now about Cooper Flag. How can you develop him? How can you add to him? It's going to be Dallas for the next 20 years, assuming they don't trade him. The Nets, I think they had some success with their 5 first-round picks. And a lot of people made fun of them for not only having 5 first-round picks, but drafting 5 and drafting 5 that ended up making the team. A lot of times they trade them away for future picks, might do a draft and stash. But they decided to pick 5 players. And not only do they pick 5 players, they picked 5 players that not a lot of people were super excited on. And I think they did okay with them. And I think that's enough reason for optimism. Because going into the year, you weren't really high on any of them, at least for me. But now, Yegor Demon, I think, is somebody really worth mentioning when you talk about Brooklyn. Nolan Traore has looked really good, especially recently. Even like a Danny Wolf, I think could be a nice rotation piece at some point. Drake Powell, Ben Seraph haven't had a ton of minutes. They're a little bit more projects. But especially those first 3, there's something there. And if you're trying to build a young team, you need a lot of young players, and the Nets have them. So I think that's enough reason to be optimistic. The Nuggets, it's been kind of a tough year with injuries. Guys have been in and out. But Jokic, Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, that trio, right now their net rating is 25.5 this year when those 3 players are on the court together. So as much as it's been a little bit chaotic, Aaron Gordon's been hurt, Cam Johnson got hurt, then of course Jokic got hurt. But when their big 3 is playing, they are still one of the best teams in the league. And, net rating, a little bit of a small sample size, I get. But when those 3 are on the court, they're still really, really good. And so when you come playoff time, if those 3 are healthy, you're going to give them a shot no matter what else has happened. The Pacers, a rough year. Let's just be honest. It's been a really rough year in Indiana. But I think the reason for optimism is it's looking like a 1-year rebuild. Halliburton's going to come back. You traded for Zubats, and you're essentially just going to do a really, really hard 1-year rebuild and then try to compete. And honestly, that's kind of what they should have done. And that's probably the way to go. If you weren't that confident that they were going to perform well without Halliburton, then you might as well tank. I know that's a pretty contested topic right about now, but it's honestly the smart thing to do. Because now if they can end up with an AJ DeBonsa or a Cam Boozer, or Darren Peterson, if you can add one of those three to, Halliburton, Zubats, Pascal Siakam, then guys like Andrew Nembhard, guys like Aaron Nesmith are kind of back into their roles where they can really succeed. And then all of a sudden you've got a good team. So it's not been a fun year, but if you're Indiana, it's probably the smart thing to do. And now you can just go back to competing. So that's the exciting thing. Hopefully they can get some lottery luck as well. The Pelicans, I would just be excited that Zion is finally healthy. And I don't want to jinx it. Of course, next week this could completely change. But as of recording this, he's played in 39 of the last 40 games. So the first time in his career he's ever done that. And he's looked good. He's still a lot of the Zion that we have seen and have wanted. It's been maybe a little bit less of a usage, a little bit less pressure on his body, but I think it's working out. And so if you're going to get this Zion, a Zion who's maybe 90% of what he was, but a Zion that's staying healthy, that is huge. And they now have to make the hard decision. Do you take this, hopefully what will be a pretty healthy season, and do you now bet on Zion? And you say, okay, something's changed. He's now getting healthy. Now he's one of our cornerstones. Or do you sell high? And I think similar to the conversation with Giannis, I think both are okay if I'm a Pelicans fan. If I want to bet on Zion, I don't know if I would, but if you believe he's going to stay healthy, that's exciting. He's one of the better players in the league when he's healthy. If you want to sell high, and if you can get some team to give you a pretty big package for him, I think I'd also be okay with it. So it's not been a good year for the Pelicans, but seeing Zion healthy is exciting. So that's definitely one reason to be optimistic. The Pistons, obviously tons of reasons to be optimistic. I'm going to just lump them together and say the old school Pistons are back. This feels like the Pistons of the 90s, feels like the Pistons of the early 2000s. Cade Cunningham, he's obviously a star. I'm really happy for him. But the way they play, the way they are one of the best defensive teams, they've got a lot of players who step up, even when guys are in and out of the lineup. It's a really fun team. I do have questions come playoff time, but we'll save that for another time. It's just been really exciting to watch. Even from an outside fan, it's fun to see Detroit back and good again. It's really fun to see Cade Cunningham playing well. So it's an exciting team. Lots of reason for optimism, not just this year, but for the future. The Raptors, to me, their identity is working. And under Darko, they've really embraced their identity of big, long, physical, being a defensive team. And a lot of their guys fit that mold. It's been the Raptors' really kind of way ever since Masai Ujiri was there. I mean, you think Scotty Barnes, you think even Brandon Ingram is long. Then they've brought in Colin Murray-Boyles. They've brought in guys like Jamal Shed, Jacoby Walter, Chai Obaji. A lot of big, physical, long, and just guys who are going to work. And that has really helped them this year. Now, a lot of their success also has been Scotty Barnes taking another step. Brandon Ingram has played well. But they're kind of a surprise team in the East. Not a lot of people talk about them, but they're in position to be a top 6 seed. And even if you don't talk about them a lot, their identity is working. They've gotten a good group together, and they're a fun team to watch and a fun team to root for, even if, they don't get a ton of headlines. The Rockets, I would say a reason for optimism is Reed Shepherd. I think he has stepped up in Fred VanVleet's absence. Obviously, lots of other reasons you could point to. They still have Ahmed Thompson and Alperen Şengün, despite maybe an up and down year. Bringing in Kevin Durant has been great, a lot of fun. Guys like Jamari Smith, Tari Eason as well. But it's been a little bit shaky getting all those guys together. And I think the key is Reed Shepherd taking a step. He still isn't asked to do a ton. There are probably still questions about what his true ceiling is. But I mean, you think back to last year when he kind of looked like a number 3 pick that really wasn't going to be able to contribute, to now having to step up and has looked good in stretches. That's big. Because you can't have a number 3 pick and bust on that pick. And I don't think the Rockets did. I think Reed Shepherd is here to stay. And that's been Maybe an unintended consequence of losing Fred VanVleet. I would have liked to see them add in another guard, either in the beginning or at the trade deadline. But Reed Shepard looks good, and I think that's been a positive for this year. The Spurs, tons of reasons. Wimby would obviously be the big one. I'm going to go their backcourt. I think Dylan Harper and Stephon Castle, they might be the best young backcourt in the league. And obviously Maxey and Edgecombe, that's where we started. They would also be up there. But those two, along with Wimby, I mean, they got a big three for a long time. And yes, I recognize there's lots of other good players. But the benefit of having those three all under 22 years old is kind of crazy. So tons of reason to be optimistic. I'm going to just put those three. It's going to be a fun postseason, that's for sure, in San Antonio. The Suns, multiple guys have taken a big leap under Jordan Ott. And after last year, where you can blame Kevin Durant if you want, you can blame coaching, you could blame roster construction. It wasn't a great couple years in Phoenix. But I think now bringing in Jordan Ott, who has gotten career years out of Dylan Brooks, gotten career years out of, you could argue, Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal, you could argue those two. Colin Gillespie looks like one of the most improved players in the league. It's a way less talented group, or at least a way less big name group than they've had. And yet they're doing better. And so that's a reason to be optimistic, because yes, you have still Devin Booker, but other than that, you've just brought in a lot of just good vets, a lot of role players, and they're all thriving under your system. So I would point that to Jordan Ott. I think he's been one of the better coaches this year. And it's important to find a good coach. It's important to be able to put together a good system. And I think the Suns have done that. The Thunder, there wasn't a championship hangover. And despite losing Jalen Williams, despite losing Chet for a little bit, despite losing SGA even for a few games, they really haven't taken a step back. And yes, they didn't follow the pace of potentially the best team ever, like it looked like in the beginning, but they're still a really, really good team. And there was just no championship hangover. Are they going to win it all again? It's going to be tough. The West is just as tough, if not tougher this year. But if they don't win, it's not because they got a lot worse. They're still really good, and they still have a great future. I mean, they just will continue to have first-round picks, continue to have young guys to add to this group. The Timberwolves, Anthony Edwards is a star, and I don't really have anything else other than that. If I'm a Minnesota fan, I am just hoping and praying that Anthony Edwards never leaves, because he is going to be the best player and the franchise icon in Minnesota when it's all said and done. The question is now, when does he get, an MVP? If he gets one, when can he get a championship? But that's where we're trending. That's how good I think he is. And that's how good of a face I think he is. Not just that he's a top 10, potentially now top 5 player. It's also that he's a very fun player to root for. And if I was picking players that I wanted on my team, Anthony Edwards would be right near the top. So just him by himself, reason to be really optimistic in Minnesota. Trailblazers, Donovan Clingan to me now looks like a franchise center. And I don't know if I would have said that last year, but his improvement is big, because they've had a good amount of guards over the last few years. Obviously started with Simons, but now Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe. They brought in Drew Holiday. They brought Dame Lillard back. They needed somebody inside, and they needed some sort of presence inside. And that honestly looks like Donovan Clingan. I do think he is a big part of their future. And I wouldn't have said that last year. So that's been huge, and honestly changes the outlook of Portland. That's how big I think it is. And then lastly, the Washington Wizards. Well, we just saw them give up 83 points to Bam. So not exactly the most exciting season and best season for a Washington fan. But to me, multiple young guys have shown flashes. I think Keyshawn George pretty early on showed a lot of flash. Alex Sarr, when he's healthy and has played, has looked really good. I'd be really excited to watch him in the next couple of years. And then even guys like Will Riley has stepped up the last few weeks. He actually now looks like a real piece. Bilal Coulibaly, Trey Johnson. There's pieces there. And I haven't even gotten to Trae Young and Anthony Davis, who they traded for. So it's been a rough year. I think Washington, like a lot of these other teams, have really embraced the tank and are really making sure they can do whatever it takes to get a top 4 pick in this year's draft. But the future is there. And I think those young players that we've seen flashes for, that's enough reason to kind of be drawn toward the Washington future. And in a year that's not a lot of fun to watch, I'm sure a lot of Washington fans just aren't watching the games anymore. Focusing on those young players will give you optimism for the future. And whether or not that changes things, who knows? We'll see when Trae Young and Anthony Davis get there. But there's something building in Washington. So I like that. So that was all 30 teams. One reason to be optimistic, not only this year, but for the future for each team. It was a lot to get through. Didn't spend that much time on each team. You wanted to kind of get through all 30 teams pretty quickly. But there's a lot of reason for optimism to go around in the NBA. Lots of really good players, lots of good young players, which is also why it's time to expand. And I will be doing an expansion draft some point before the end of the NBA season. So if you want to watch that, if you want to watch lots of other videos that I got coming, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Lots of other videos coming in the next couple months. Lots of NBA stuff, but also lots of NFL, MLB, lots of other things. So if you like this video, if you want to see more content like this, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe button, and we will see you in the next video.